Welcome to Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Geri Simon, a League member and your host. Each program we talk about important public policy issues. We hope you'll discuss those same issues, and then at election time you'll be ready and willing to go vote. This program we're going to have a little unicameral wrap-up or preview for the next session with our highly unpaid lobbyists for the Nebraska League and the Omaha League, Peggy Adair. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, let's do a little quick overview of the last session of the unicameral, when that started, when it ended, and ended a little early. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It's a 2-year session, and the first year is 90 working days long. They did manage to cut that short a little bit, and it's also the budget setting session, so that's what they had to get that accomplished, which they did. Then the next year is just this kind of like the second half of the session, and it's 60 working days long. Okay. So any bill that wasn't killed but didn't move through this session will start out right where it ended this session. So say the bill's on general file, it'll pick up on general file next session, and it may or may not go forward from there.
And if there were bills that were still in committee that didn't come out?
Same thing, they could be pulled out of committee. It's likely not, but it could happen.
Okay, but senators will still set priority bills and new legislation for the next session?
Yes, just as in the first session, they'll have 10 working days to get new bills in the hopper.
Okay, and it'll start in January, as usual. Okay,
yes.
It just ends early. Okay. And then for any of the bills, just again to remind our viewers, you have 3 readings and 3 votes, essentially.
Yes.
And that's...
Yes, general file, yes, it comes out of, a bill will come out of committee with or without amendments, and then from that point, then it goes to general file, and it'll have a full debate on the floor. And the nice thing, one of the many nice things about our legislature is that everything is transcribed. So every word that they say on the floor of the legislature is transcribed for posterity, and you can actually, any citizen can go back and look and see exactly what they had to say about a bill, not only in this session, but in previous sessions as well. Okay. So it's good to get that kind of history if you're researching a particular issue. Right. So they'll have a debate, general file debate. It takes 25 votes to move that bill forward from that general debate, and if it does so, then it goes to select file, and again it may or may not have more amendments on it, and then it goes to final reading, and generally final reading is simply reading the bill.
Okay, and then the final vote, and then it passes or it doesn't.
Yes, and then it goes to the governor, and he can either sign the bill or not sign the bill and just let it become law without his signature, or he can veto the bill.
And it takes how many senators to override a veto?
It takes 30 votes to override that.
Okay, out of the 49 senators.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about it seemed, may or may not, impression that more senators use something called present not voting this session. Talk about that. It's like an abstention, right, from voting?
Yes, and I would say the main issue is that there are a lot of freshman senators in this session, which there tend to be pretty much in every session, about 17 new folks, and there's a learning curve in the legislature, just as there is in any new undertaking. And some of the new senators thought they knew everything about everything when they jumped into this, and they try to do the same types of things that somebody like Senator Chambers does, abstaining from voting, but they were actually using it in a different fashion. Okay. Ernie Chambers will be present and not voting on a bill if he wants to be able to move forward with that bill and redirect that bill. Because the only way that you can ask for another vote on the bill is if you abstain from voting, if you did not vote.
Okay.
So he will use that as a method to either elongate the debate or do something else with the bill. So he always has something up his sleeve when he does it. He does it for a purpose. In general, what I found, the purpose that some of the other senators did that where they were present and they were not voting, it was because there would be a bill that was a pretty good bill, but that they didn't want to see passed, but they didn't have the courage to either vote for it and have it pass, or vote against it and have kind of that mud on their face because they voted against a popular bill. So it was actually kind of like the cowardly way out was to be there, be present, and not vote on the bill.
Okay. All right. This legislature passed the budget in this first session, and there has been a budget shortfall. Should we be surprised that there wasn't a special session called to adjust that?
I was surprised.
Okay.
But on the other hand, special sessions cost money too.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, the governor had to weigh whether or not it was worth trying to do that. So and chose not to.
So will they do any fixing of budget in the next session?
Sure, yes,
Probably?
yes.
I mean, that's typical
Yeah.
that they would do that.
Yep.
Okay. One of the things now that they're adjourned until next January, that there are interim committees and studies.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. I think if I counted them, there are about 127
Yes.
resolutions for studies that go to committee. So talk about that process.
Yeah.
And
And that's really not an unusual number.
Okay.
Often a senator will introduce a bill for the first time, knowing that it's not going to go very far, and he will just say to his colleagues, "Well, I want to do an interim study, take a look at this issue a little bit more, and maybe invite the public to have some public input on the bill, take a little more time, gather a little bit more information." And that's generally what these interim studies are for.
Okay.
And 125 of them, obviously, we're not going to have 125, public hearings all over the state of Nebraska and some real down and dirty work on these. Some of those interim studies will have a lot done to them, and some of them will maybe just kind of sit on the shelf, and the senator will be able to say, "Well, I had this interim study, didn't go very far, but I did it."
But they get assigned to a committee, and then the committee prioritizes them for action, or no?
Generally, generally in the interim studies, it's the introducing senator who kind of takes the lead on that.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about a few of them. Some of them look at corrections, tax increment financing, use of public power. There's one that I think is interesting, use of Title X funds for family planning. Do you have any thoughts on that one, or where that one was trying to look at?
The use of Title X for family planning.
Use of Title X funds.
Or lack of use
yes.
for Title X, yes. It's always a contentious issue, which is unfortunate because family planning is very, very important to low-income families. If you're going to raise yourself out of poverty, you have to be able to plan your family and plan how far apart your babies are going to be, and it's a very, very important issue. It's a health issue, and to protect the health of our state, we need to have this type of funding for our low-income families, and it's not just a female issue, it's a family issue. It's very important.
Do you think that study might be related to there was a lot of contentious debate on looking at the health clinics in the last session and funding health clinics?
Yeah, it's an attempt to take money away from Planned Parenthood and shift that money to other facilities, but unfortunately we really do not have enough facilities in Nebraska for that shift. We need Planned Parenthood in our state and in all the states.
Okay. Another couple of interim studies that are related to, I think, probably the whole elections and voter ID kind of issue is one looking at elections conducted by and on behalf of political subdivisions, and then one examining the extent of voter fraud in Nebraska. And what do you think about those two? They seem kind of linked together.
Well, I'm not aware of any voter fraud in Nebraska, and neither is Secretary of State John Gale.
Right.
It is just, it comes up time and time again, and it just fans the flames of anger and hatred and separating one folk from another folk, and I just wish it would just go away. But we will have it again.
Yeah,
and again,
I think
and
will.
again.
Okay. Then another couple of interesting ones, again, related to insurance issues, is looking at how we can increase access to health insurance, including Medicaid, and then reviewing Medicaid and long-term care access in Nebraska. And so thoughts on those?
Yes. Nebraska, just like other states that are like us, we have a very, very vast expanse of rural area, and those areas are always underserved with health and with mental health issues. And it's very important for those local hospitals in those towns to have Medicaid because 60, 70, 80% of their patients might be Medicaid eligible patients, and it's extremely important for the local economy to have access to Medicaid funding. It's very important for rural states like Nebraska to have that. And I wish more of the state senators would be in support of that. We've fought, 4 or 5 years now to get Medicaid expansion, and it would have saved our, talk about the budget shortfall, it would have saved us millions and millions of dollars every year, and would have been a healthier outcome for our citizens in Nebraska.
Right. And then the other issue about Medicaid that I think when you mention rural areas, and even it affects the whole state, is long-term care facilities.
Yes.
People need to think about, there are so many. When your Medicare coverage for your long-term or skilled nursing care runs out, a lot of people need to go on Medicaid if they're going to be in a care facility for a long time.
Yes, and that's all they have. That's the only income that they have, and they definitely do rely on that. And these are, these are our folks who have lived here for 90 years, and this is all they have is the Medicaid funding. And without it, talk about death panels. There you go. It's very important for our state to have that.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit in general about this first session too. It seemed to some people were the sense, and even some of the senators, I think, we have a nonpartisan legislature, unicameral. We don't identify party when they run for office, although everybody knows what party or non-party a senator is. But did it seem like things were more partisan this session?
Oh, absolutely. And the senators themselves have said that this is one of the most contentious years that they have ever seen, and including Senator Chambers, who's been there longer than anybody else, has said that. I think it harkens back to when term limits were passed in Nebraska years ago, again and it was specifically to get rid of this one fantastic state senator named Ernie Chambers. They did so, but guess what? He came back. The problem with term limits is it becomes more polarized because people don't gain the experience. It takes a long time to figure out how things work, and 2 or 3 years in, you're finally getting your feet wet in the process. And the longer that you are there, the less you have to rely on lobbyists and outside interests, because you gain your own institutional knowledge, and you have more of the courage of your convictions because you have that experience. That's very important. In the bad old days, we had people there who'd maybe been there 18, 20 years. Ernie's been there 40 years. And he has that institutional knowledge that the young new state senators don't have. So it creates partisanship when you don't have that experience, and you rely on, maybe you rely on your political party, maybe you rely on the lobbyists because you don't have that personal experience yourself.
Okay.
And then they have to get reelected.
Yes, and they're limited to 2 4-year terms back to back, and then you could be off, voted out after, term limited, and then you could come back again to run again. Yes. Which is what Chambers has done.
Exactly.
With the term limits. I think there was an attempt too that some people thought that for our committees, in a lot of other state legislatures, the party in majority has a lot of control over the other members of the legislature.
Sure.
And here we have committee chairmanships that are not, were done by secret ballot to elect those. There was an attempt to change that. So could you talk about that in terms of the hyper-partisan atmosphere?
Yeah, two things happen. The reason that we have a secret ballot for the committees is so that it remains nonpartisan. So that if you are the folks who vote for a certain person because you think that person is the best, most qualified person to be the chair of that committee, even though he might be or she might be of the other political party, you don't have the pressure of people behind you, like your governor or your political party, saying, well, you should have voted for our guy. Why didn't you vote for our guy? And they put pressure on them. And Bob Christ is an example of that, where his political party put pressure on him because he opposed having having that ballot be open. He really wanted to maintain that secret ballot. So it's important for that reason that we get the most qualified person in there. So what happened during this session was there was a gang of 27, and most of them were the new folks who didn't know any better, and they all got together when we were having these committee chairs voted in, and rather than vote in the most qualified person, they voted in the person that was of their particular political party, whether or not that person was qualified. And it really, that's where the partisanship began, because people were extremely unqualified to do the particular jobs, and they didn't do them very well. There were scheduling issues. It's a complex system, and you need a little bit of experience before you become a committee chair, and we had some real problems in the committee area.
So I see this as, you might say too, term limits has had a little bit of an effect here too, because you had so many new people probably elected as a result of the prior legislator being term limited.
Yes, and actually, before term limits started, and I can't tell you the particular year, but I was a lobbyist during that time too, and you actually had kind of, natural selection. People would decide that, they don't want to run again. Maybe they had, change in family life, maybe they change in job, moving out of the state, whatever. There was kind of some natural attrition there where maybe 14, 15, 16 state senators would not run again anyway. So, numerically, it's been kind of a wash. It's just that it's been way more political as far as who comes in that's new. Okay.
Well, let's get to kind of a little recap of some of the bills that passed or didn't pass this session. Let's start talking about one that certainly the League supported and had a lot of support, but ultimately was vetoed by the governor and did not pass, was disappointing, was the changing the ability of voters who were felons to get their voting rights back immediately once they had served their time. So talk about that one a little bit.
Well, a little history that this bill, the League worked on the original bill for 5 years before we managed to get it passed, and Senator Diana Shimmick was the lead senator. She was the head of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee at that time. And in order to get that bill passed at that time, she had to insert that 2-year waiting period in order to gain. And again, that's where you negotiate and you compromise, and that was what she had to do. Had she been able to get everything she wanted, that 2-year waiting period would not have been in there. Well, we've had this bill for a number of years. I want to say 2005, I believe, is when it finally passed, and so we've had it for a number of years. There is confusion in that 2-year waiting period because, in general, the Corrections Department doesn't tell the inmates when they're leaving that their rights can be restored 2 years down the line. And 2 years down the line, a lot of things are going on in their lives. And so there's confusion with, am I eligible to vote or not? They're kind of afraid of the system in the first place, and so you lose a lot of people that way. When people have done their time, they should come back into their communities, and one of the best ways to get them reestablished in their community is that they feel like they belong, that they feel like they can make a contribution to their community. And voting is certainly that way, that they can contribute to their community and be an upstanding citizen. It's very important, and the earlier that you do that kind of stuff, the more successful it's going to be. So it was a win-win. It would make our communities safer. It would help reestablish the communities of the inmates. So, why not? Why not? And we just have a governor who is full of retribution and is vindictive, and for whatever reason chose to veto that, and it was very difficult to get enough political push to override the governor's veto.
Could we see it come back in the next session, or would it
Senator
take
Vargas said that he did plan
he'll
to bring it back again.
So we could see it in this next session again.
Yes.
Okay, keep an eye on that. Let's talk a little bit about, we thwarted for the 6th time the voter ID attempt to get that on the ballot for people to require voter ID. Do you think we're going to see that come back again?
Unfortunately, yes, I do. And one of the things that the League of Women Voters really needs to do is to educate people about the voter registration system and how the registration works. People are more likely to have issues with voting when they actually vote by mail and in their own homes, because they can be pressured by family members to vote in a certain way. But as far as going to your polling place and voting, everybody knows everybody. I've been going to the same little elementary
Sure.
school for 30 years,
Right.
and they would kind of look crosswise if somebody else showed up and said they were Peggy Adair's. I don't know,
Yeah.
you're too tall.
And our own Secretary of State has said that voter fraud is,
Absolutely,
I mean,
yes.
it's pretty almost
Yes.
non-existent in
Well,
the state.
And it's insulting, I think, to our Secretary of State and to our election commissioners to say to them, well, you're not doing it right. They work really, really hard to make our system work and work well. And I think what we need to do is work with them to improve things.
Mhm.
So, and that's what we need to be doing.
Okay. What Medicaid expansion on that might be a little tricky in terms of, it depends on what happens on the federal level right now.
Yes.
But do you see anything with expanding Medicaid or making changes coming up in this next session?
I'm sure it will come up again and again. Unfortunately, I just get the feeling that every year that it comes up, it's even a little weaker than the year before. I think the first push in the first couple of years where we could have had 100% of our Medicaid funding paid by the federal government, it was exciting, and it would have helped our citizens. And now people are just getting exhausted. They're just year after year after year getting exhausted, and their hope is dashed
Mhm.
when they think they're going to lose their health.
Right. Right.
So it's very concerning.
Okay. What about redistricting? There was a little bit of work done, a couple of competing bills, and I'm not sure that the two senators actually figured out what the
Yes.
differences were, but
Yeah.
should we see a commission or committee or something to deal with redistricting and how we handle it? A piece of
And I think
legislation?
redistricting is something that's going to come up at the federal and the state level. I think a lot of the states are looking at redistricting now because a lot of the states are realizing that this was the root of the problem. Redistricting in 2010, which gerrymandered things that look
Right.
like, dragons,
Right.
has been the root of the problem when you know that you are a Republican or a Democrat and in a certain district, and because it's been gerrymandered that a Republican is going to gain that seat, you have to go further and further and further and further to the right in order to gather enough constituents to win. And so it's kind of, we've fallen off the cliff because of that. So, and I think people are beginning to realize, certainly the courts are beginning to realize that and are trying to make amends. And so I certainly do think there's going to be progress made in that respect, and we certainly need that.
Yeah, and so we're looking at a bipartisan kind of a commission that takes the politics out of deciding
Yes.
how the districts are drawn.
Yes, and that's going to be hard fought battle because obviously there are political reasons for continuing gerrymandering or for shifting the map in a different direction.
Right.
But there have been nonpartisan organizations who have mapped out plans that make a lot of sense, and so hopefully we can use something like that.
Okay. That kind of shifts to a couple of bills that I wanted you to talk about and see if we'll see in this Nebraska unicameral this next session. They're come from the American Legislative Exchange Council. They're a couple of model bills of theirs. The one we saw last time was on the Constitutional Convention, and we likely may see that again. But there's a new one that is being pushed as a model. It's for repealing the 17th Amendment, which allows us to directly elect our U.S. senators at the federal level. We've done that for over 100 years. And they want to switch it back to what we did in the 17th and 18th century, which was to have the legislatures appoint the two U.S. senators. And so do you think we're going to see that one be introduced in our unicameral?
That's pretty terrifying.
It is.
The reason that that was put forth in the first place was we were very tiny, new country, and we didn't have a whole lot of educated people. And those who were in power didn't trust the people to vote. And so they tried to, various ways to take voting away from the masses. And that's what's happening again, is they don't trust people to vote, and so they're trying to take voting away from the masses. When you look at the last presidential election, the person who was elected president did not get the popular vote. and that has happened more and more often in this century. That speaks volumes, and we need to move forward in our democratic process rather than moving backwards.
Okay. So we should watch for that one to see if it's introduced.
Yes,
and
we should.
People will want to speak to their senators if that one comes up. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk we have a few minutes left. Let's just talk about league lobbying and the next session and how we decide what bills we will or won't take positions on. How do we do that?
Sure. Again, the next session will start early January. I think it's like the first, Wednesday after the first Monday in January. And the way that the league determines what our priority bills are going to be is we're an all-volunteer organization, and so we kind of have to narrow down what we can actually go down and lobby on. We certainly monitor a lot of bills. We will support or oppose a lot of bills, but we might not necessarily be able to actually, again, go down and in-person lobby for those bills because we just don't have the woman power to do that. But any bill that we support or oppose has to fit a league position. Right. And the example I always use is the winner takes all. That bill comes up time and time again in Nebraska because we have carved out this little Douglas County, and little Douglas County voted for President Obama in the first election, so he gained our one electoral vote out of our 5 electoral votes. And the senators who are in power keep trying to get us back to winner take all, to take away that one little vote. Our league cannot lobby against that because the National League supports winner take all. And because of that, even though our local league feels very strongly that we need the system to stay as it is, we can't lobby. Right. We can, as individuals, certainly go down there.
But our league position is that we can't take action without a league position, whether it's on a national, state, or local level.
Yes.
Okay.
So that happens on every bill. So we have to look at the bill. Is there a position? Does the position fit what we locally feel would be important? And then that's how we.
Well, thank you, Peggy. And for more information, our members or people can go to omahalwv.org.
Yes.
So thanks very much. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Geri Simon, reminding you to inform yourself about the issues, and at election time, go vote, Omaha. That was fast. It was fast. It was very fast. Thank you.